battles unfold on the tableless expanse. Miniature warriors in a strategic dance. 15 millimeters of intricate design. A world of conflict in a scaled down line. Terrain crafted with precision and care. Armies maneuver under watchful glare. Dice roll to decide the fate of the day.
Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I'm coming back at you with another wargaming and miniature video. In today's video, what we're going to do is an overview of the Pendragon rules as I see them. And what I'll do is I brought up the core rule book on PDF so that we can kind of flip through it and I can kind of highlight some certain things I like or dislike about the rules. And in addition to that, I want to make everyone aware that this is not going to be a line-by-line rule book. It's not a tutorial. It's not a review. What it is kind of just a highlight overview of what I think about the rules. And I also want to make an announcement that I am running Pendragon. We play every Thursday, and we use Roll20 as our game engine, and we have people all around the world that play. If you are interested in joining a Pendragon role-playing game, we would be glad to host you and have you join our game and enjoy the game firsthand. We are currently actively looking for players because we just lost a couple of players due to various reasons. So we have openings. So if you're interested, come join us. Okay, so the meat and potatoes of this rule book. Oh, by the way, I have streamed some of these games on my channel. So if you want, go back and watch those videos. And you can kind of see how I interact with the players. You can see how the players interact with each other. And you can see if that's something that you would be interested in, because not everybody gels with everyone else, and I get that. Okay, so let's talk about the Pendragon rules. First of all, I don't know, can you see my mouse pointer? Okay, good, you can. Down here you got Chaosium Incorporated and Greg Stafford. Now, I don't know if you guys are very familiar with Chaosium, the company, or they've been around a long time, almost as long as Wizards of the Coast or TSR. They've been around a lot longer than Wizards of the Coast or TSR, because I think both of those one started with D&D and then, well, actually Chainmail, and then the other one started, late in the game and is current D&D. And then eventually went to Hasbro, and we don't need to get into all that. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is Chaosium's been around a long time, and they made a great rule system. When I played RuneQuest, I don't know if you're familiar with that game, but there's a game out there called RuneQuest, and Greg Stafford is was the author of that as well. And this was before Pendragon. I do believe Pendragon came out around 85. I think RuneQuest came out before that, maybe 80. Or something like that. But RuneQuest has an excellent combat system. It has an excellent skill system and leveling system and magic system, and basically it's a really good game. Now, the downside on RuneQuest, I know this isn't a RuneQuest stream, but RuneQuest had a unique world, which in genre and mythos and the monsters were unique, and some of it was just a little silly. It was okay, but it it was like a James Gunn movie. You know, you had some. It was a serious game, but there was too much silliness in there. Um, but as a game master, you could always drop the silly aspects of the game, right? And so you could make, and that's what I did when I ran RuneQuest, and uh, I love that game. I like the mechanics way better than D&D in my opinion, and it had some unique concepts and philosophies, um, and then Greg made another game that you probably have heard of, Call of Cthulhu, right? So based on the Lovecraftian novels, the Cthulhu mythos, with all the horror and dark magic and all that in like a I've only played a few games of Call of Cthulhu, and it wasn't because of the game mechanics, because the Greg keeps the core concept of his rules of throughout all of his different games, which if you really believe in what your product is, you're going to reuse the core mechanics. And but there were some changes from RuneQuest to Call of Cthulhu there, because you had to make some changes because of the modern uh, genre. You had to change some mechanics because of he added something for insanity and gunpowder and stuff like that. So, but the overall general like stat line and die rolls and stuff like that remained consistent. Okay, and then he made Pendragon. Now, the Pendragon that I have on the screen here, I do believe is the 6th edition of Pendragon. And throughout the years, he's gone through a variety of different editions. And I don't really think, I think he's learned his lessons or learned, some takeaways from what he wrote, and he said, you know what, I could do better. I could change this and make this a better game. And that's what he did throughout his different editions. What I think is this new edition of 6th edition uses a D20 to resolve tasks instead of a percentile dice, because all of his previous games you have a skill with percentile chance to succeed. So you would have let's just say lock picking. I'm just making something up. Let's say lock picking, and you might have like a 67% chance to succeed, and you have to roll under a 67%, and then there were your critical chance varied based on how good your skill was, and don't need to get into it too deep, but there was you had a percentile. Everything was rolled on percentile, which does make the world or the skills and tasks and everything else very there's a word for it, very fine-tuned, I don't know what the word is, but there's a word that means that it's super accurate to what your skill is, because one guy might have a 65 and you might have a 67. There's a 2% difference, right? And that 2% out of 100 is very low, right? It's a very small difference, but there is a difference where in the new 6th edition Pendragon, they use a D20. to decide tasks. And so you might have a 10, and you have to roll still lower than your value. So basically, everything's done in increments of 5%, right? Because a 1 in a d20 is 5%. So, and oh, the difference between a 1 and a 2 is a lot bigger in Pendragon than it would be in older versions. Okay, I'm getting distracted. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, um, his various rules all are based on this core set of rules that are, and I even think he wrote a a book called Basic Role Playing, BRP, I think, and it takes the core mechanics from RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, Pendragon, Paladin, whatever other game mechanics he might have, he incorporated it into one book. So if you have like your own fantasy world or whatever, that basic role playing book is all you would need. Okay, so let's talk about Pendragon because that's why you guys are here, right? Um, okay. Well, you already know one difference between his previous rules and the current edition of Pendragon is that it uses a d20 to resolve skills. But let's talk. I'm gonna kind of scroll. I got to use my scroll on my mouse to change pages to kind of assist me in the describing Pendragon. Okay, first of all, I want you to, before we go any further, just right there, core rule book, right. There are three other products that you can get for Pendragon 6th edition. There's something called the starter set. I looked over the starter set and I think it is just that. It's got everything you need to run a ongoing campaign forever with the starter set. There's not much difference in the core rulebook and the starter set. The starter set is just broken down into bite-sized chunks. There's like three different books. They're all little. They're flexible. You've got cards. You got maps. You got character folios for knights. It basically has everything in it that you need to start. And I've even thought about going back and picking it up. I have the PDF version, which doesn't give it any justice because the starter set comes with all these physical things like cards and dice and folios that you can hand out to your players at the table, and there's a lot of things in that, and it comes with like three books. Um, I strongly recommend that one. Well, I don't. I'm just saying it's a good product. Let's just say that, and it's not that expensive. That's another thing. Chaosium doesn't seem to be trying to fleece their customers. They're keeping all their books and products in a very reasonable price. Okay, and the next thing, there is what's called the Game Master book. The Game Master book, which I pre-ordered and got the hard copy and the PDF. Think of it like an add-on or a supplement. Uh, it kind of takes some of the rules in Pendragon that might have been left out and flesh or some of them that are in the rule book but don't have, maybe only have one paragraph or something, and they really flesh it out. Plus they introduce a few additional rules in the Game Master book. Don't think of the Game Master, I don't think of the core rule book and the Game Master book as like the player's handbook and the DMG. I don't look at it like that. I think of it like book 1 and book 2 because they're really both for the Game Master, in my opinion. But the core rulebook is good for the players as well to understand the core mechanics if they would like. And then there's another book called it's a campaign adventure book, and it's called The Gray Knight. So if you wanted to run some published material for 6th edition, you could get the Game Master book, the starter set, and the Gray Knight, because they all they don't overlap when it comes to the timeline. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute, because Pendragon is based on the legends, the stories about King Arthur and his world, right? Things happened in King Arthur's world before he was even born. Things happen in King Arthur's world even after he died. So, and Pendragon covers all of it. So as a game master, if you wanted to run a game 30 years before King Arthur was born, you could do that. And if you wanted to run a game, late in King Arthur's reign, where there's the Round Table and knights in shining armor, you could do that too. So you can run it at any period in the King Arthur world. Now, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the King Arthur universe. It would be useful, but as a player in the Pendragon, not the game master, but as a player, it would be better if you knew nothing about the world, and you could experience it through the eyes of your character, because the Pendragon, Pendragon, I'm going to call it rules, but the Pendragon universe is heavily steeped in the King Arthur world. And a lot of the references made in the adventures are made from the stories and the novels and stuff like that. So as a game master, if you want to play Pendragon with King Arthur involved, Uther before him, and then Uther's death and Excalibur and all that crazy stuff, then the Pendragon Adventures is just right for you. But you can take the Pendragon rules, and this is what I plan to do and what I am currently doing in my campaign. I'm taking the Pendragon core rules, and I am using elements from King Arthur's stories, but I'm making it my own, and I am changing what happens in the written, we'll call it written word. I'm changing that because I don't want everything to be predetermined, if that makes sense. I want the players to have agency in the world. All right, so let's keep going. I'm sorry. I know this is going to be a long video. I didn't mean it to be a long video. Okay, so we've got a lot of people, and you got a write-up from Greg up here. We got playtesters and all that great stuff. Okay, we're all familiar with that. And then you got table of contents. Notice how this table of contents is only half a page. And then we're talking about tables down here, which is, when I'm using it in Roll20, it's very important because I can pull up a table that I might need to roll on. All I really need to know is the table code, which is the chapter on which table it is. But if you look up here, we've got welcome to the campaign, and then we got the game system. Notice how small that is. 25 to 34. What is that? 9 pages. of the game system. But that's not true, because the entire thing is the game system. We talk about creating your character. You can Pendragon has a couple of different ways. It has a point buy system where you can spend points and make your character exactly the way you want it, or you can roll dice. I actually prefer the roll dice because it doesn't allow your players to min max, right? And I'm a very anti min maxy kind of person. Okay, traits and passions. In this game, you have this is something I kind of love, but I also kind of hate. In Pendragon, there is game mechanics that it's the traits and passions. The passions portion of it, I kind of dig very much, but the traits part of it, I kind of I accept, and as a player, I hope you accept it as well. And there's a reason why I accept it, and I'll try to see if I can explain this. But let me say what it is first of all. You might have a trait that is chaste versus lustful, right? I'm just going to use this as an example. And you have a number for each of them because they're considered opposites, right? And they would be on one line of your character sheet. And on one side you have chaste, and on the other side you have lustful. And the total of these two numbers total 20. So if chaste goes up, your lustful will go down. And if your lustful goes up, your chaste will go down. So now, also, if your lustful goes down, your chaste will go up too. So as long as they both total 20, everything is fine. This is to inform the player how to play his character, which I don't like. This is the part I don't like. I don't like the numbers on your character sheet telling a player what they have to do. But on the other hand, on the flip side of that same coin, I love the fact that it tells the player how his character might be thinking. Because let's just say, I'm gonna use the chaste and the lustful as an example. Let's just say you're a knight and you're in a situation, and there's a beautiful woman, and she is coming on to you pretty hard, right? You have to you have to decide as a player if you're going to attempt to be lustful and go after them, or are you going to attempt to be chaste and resist the urges. And now let's say you've got like a 15 chaste and a 5 lustful. You might say, looking at my character, I see that I am a very chaste character. I'm going to resist. I hate that because that tells the player how to run his character. But on the other hand, it takes a little bit of the agency away from the player, so that he can first of all, he can blame it on his character sheet. He could say, well, I've got a 15 chaste, so I guess I'm gonna be chaste. No, you just say, no, I'm gonna go after her. And then me as a referee, I might say, okay, make a chaste roll. And then he rolls, and if he rolls a 15 or less, I tell him, no, you don't. and I interject and I tell him how to play his character. I say, no, you've stopped. You came to your senses and you decided that it wouldn't be wise to sleep with this peasant woman or whatever. And and I it's the one mechanic in the entire rule book that I kind of don't agree with. I love the fact that the players can assign these numbers. First of all, you roll initial rolls, but everybody gets points to spend so if they want, like, let's say they get a 10 chase and a 10 lustful. If they want their character to be lustful, they could have put points into lustful and raised it up, right? So they are kind of designing their character, right? So it's not 100% the game telling you how to play. It's the game telling you all of these different traits are important. Spend your points wisely and design your character's personality around these traits. So I kind of love that, but I'm not sure if I'm torn. I'm torn on that. But let me explain this. This game is not designed to be D&D. It's not designed to be RuneQuest. It's not designed to be GURPS or any Palladium or any of the fantasy games. It's not designed to be like that. Which all of those games were very player-centric, where the player decides what his character is going to do constantly. Like, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do that, I'm going to role play in this way, I'm going to introduce myself in this way. Where in Pendragon, that doesn't really exist. You play your character, you have a character, but you have to understand that your character falls inside of a bigger picture. And the reason why I say that is years of time go by very fast in this game, and your character will age out of adventuring age. You'll become an old man quickly, and you will need to make another character, or maybe your squire will step up, or maybe your child will step up and become your next character. And then they will age out, and you'll make another character, and they will age out. And it's possible that you will go through 100 years in your campaign, and that first character that you started with has long since died off somewhere, and your second character is now an old man, and you're playing the new guy. And I can see where the game needs to hold your hand a little bit, not in a bad way, because it's actually a good way, but the game holds your hand in a little way to help you play multiple characters without, having to create backstories for every single character that you play. So just understand that Pendragon is not a one and done kind of campaign. You don't make a character and play. I go into the tavern, and then I go home, and then I go the next day I go hunting, and then the next day I go. I heard that there was a wolf terrorizing this village, so I go to this to take care of this wolf, and then on the next day I have to go meet the Baron because he said that he wanted something from me, so I go visit the Baron, and then on the next... It's not like that. This game is not not like that. This game is, um, I go to a tournament. We fight in this tournament. You meet all the characters in the tournament. You have you meet the ladies. You meet the men. There's this big encounter during the tournament. Maybe there's a bear attack and you're involved and you take care of all that. And then the year is over. And then you go to the next year. So there's a lot of gaps between the adventure. So you have like an adventure, and then you have your life. D&D might call it downtime or what have you. Okay, so let me keep going. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. But that's why now passions. Okay, that was trace. Passions is done for the kind of the same reason, but everybody has likes and dislikes. And that's what your passions are. Your passions are likes and dislikes, but not just, but like and dislike is not strong enough. It's love and hate is a passion. So you would like, man, I love my wife. And I hate the bandits that are constantly attacking our house or our kingdom or whatever. And so when you are fighting or at any time, you can invoke a passion by saying, like you might be fighting these bandits that are attacking your kingdom and you have a hate bandits. You might say, Game Master, I would like to invoke my passion of hate bandits, which is a good thing. And then there's a die roll for that. And if you succeed, you get bonuses when dealing with those bandits. If you fail, you fall into a melancholy state. You become incapacitated, basically. So you got to use those passions wisely. But you're risking getting a bonus to getting a minus, basically. And I kind of love that because that kind of tells your character what you like and what you dislike. Okay, we're moving on because we don't need to get into all that. And then you got skills, which it's a skill-based game, just like almost any modern role-playing game is nowadays. But this has been ever since RuneQuest, they've had skills. And these skills in Pendragon, the list is very small. I think there's 10 skills. No, there might be double. It might be 20, 30 skills. I don't know. There's very few skills. Now, these skills are wide. They're broad, right? So like intrigue is not it's your ability to lie, your ability to eavesdrop, it's your ability to maybe sneak, it's your ability, it's a very broad skill, and all the skills are that way except the combat skills. The combat skills are very, very narrow, and also sometimes they're reliant on other skills. So like if you're on horseback and you are trying to attack with your sword, you have to compare your sword versus your horsemanship skill and use the lower of the two. So it's got its own mechanics. And I really like it. Oh, and skill rolls, there's basically two types of skill rolls. You got an opposed skill roll, which means like I'm attacking you, so we oppose each other. Or like I'm racing you from point A to point B, it would be an opposed roll. Where unopposed is usually you against the environment. So, like I'm trying to notice um, a bird flying over, I would roll my awareness, right? Where um, if there was a thief sneaking up on me, it would be an opposed roll where he would roll his stealth and I would roll my awareness, and we'll see, how that fleshes out. Skills are based, super easy to use. Okay, aspirations. Okay. Okay, so there is no experience points, but there is leveling up your skills. So, and your passions and your traits and anything else, even your stats. When you get a success with a skill, that's no big deal. It means you're doing what you've been trained. But if you critical with it, you just learned something. So you get to put a little check by it. If you fumble with a skill, you get to put a check by it as well because you learn from your mistake. And then at the end of the year, you roll against all these checks to see if your skills go up. So your skills don't go up during the year. You have to wait till it's called the winter phase. And that's basically everyone at the same time does character progression. You see if your character skills and traits and everything go up. But throughout the year, you will perform duties and tasks that might earn you glory. And then you record that, and you, at the end of the year, your glory goes up based on what you earned throughout the year. And glory is a measure of a person. So the more glory you have, the more famous you are, the more respected you are, the more feared you are, or even the more loved you are. Because, like if you got all your glory from defeating bandits, then the villagers or whatever are gonna love you. But if you got all your glory from killing bandits, or I'm sorry, killing peasants, they might fear you, But usually glory comes from combat, but that's not always the way. If you notice something that nobody else saw, you might get some glory. If you deliver a message and it was a really long ways, you had to go through a desert with no water and all that, you might earn glory. So glory is kind of just, think of it like fame or heroism. And that is the reason why you do what you do. You're trying to get glory. Now, honor is, yeah, it's self-explanatory. You know what honor is. Then there's um, ideals and Knights of the Round Table. Okay, we won't really get into that, but there are different types of knights. There's like the romantic knight, there's the chivalric knight, there's the uh, basically different types of. It's like a sub. Think of it like a subclass. Okay, and then you have combat. There's rules, and that I consider that part of the game system. It explains how the combat works, and it's very simple. It's not a complicated system, but it is but it but it is different. It's not hard, it's just different. But usually, let's say, and think of combat as it's not like I pull my sword out and I hit you over the head with it. That's not combat. Combat is dodging and putting your shield in the way and swinging like 1,500 times and getting hit in the armor and getting knocked to the ground and getting back up and running around. That's combat. And this system simulates that. And it represents that combat by an opposed skill roll. I roll my combat, you roll your combat, and if you succeed, then you get to defend yourself. If you fail, you don't get to defend yourself. If you succeed better than your opponent, you actually get to attack him or damage him. You roll damage against him. But remember, if you succeed and he succeeds, then at least he'll get to block. But whoever rolled higher gets to inflict injury on your opponent. I love that because that simulates a very good fighter against a very bad fighter. You have an advantage because you're going to succeed more often and you're going to be able to succeed with a higher roll. I like this because you have to roll lower than your number to succeed. You're like, well, if I'm looking to roll low, then how am I going to beat someone if I roll a 2 and he rolls a 3 or whatever? Think of it like The Price is Right. You have to be the closest to the number without going over. So if your skill is 15 and you roll a 14, you did really good. You succeeded with a 14, where your opponent, let's say he's got a skill of 10 and he succeeds, but he rolls a 9, then you beat him because a 14 is better than a 9, right? Super simple system. And so that gives skilled fighters, skilled combatants, an advantage, which they should have, right? As opposed to an armor class system. The system doesn't have any armor classes. You have armor that you wear, but armor has nothing to do with whether someone hits you or not, right? That's just, I fought with sword and shield in combat where I was trying to defeat my opponent and he was trying to defeat me. And I understand that my armor has nothing to do, zero to do with them able to hit me or not. What my armor did was stop me from getting injured. My armor protected me, not stop them from hitting me. And I know a lot of people get the D&D combat mechanics mixed up with a strike. It's not. It's actually, originally it was designed to be a full minute of combat with a bunch of dice and everything. And the roll in D&D, the roll wasn't to see if you could strike your opponent. It was to see if you could hurt your opponent. And armor helped prevent that injury, right? But then through the years, it evolved into 5-second combat rounds or 6-second combat rounds where each roll of the die was like an attack, and you could get 2 or 3 or more attacks, and based on your level or whatever. And that is not what D&D was originally. D&D was, you have a melee round and it took a long time, like a minute, and in that round you rolled against an armor class, not to see if you could hit him, because you probably hit him 5 or 6, 10 times, but did you hurt him? And if he's wearing full plate, he's not going to be hurt very often, but if he's wearing leather, he's going to be hurt more often. So that's in the D&D system. Where in Pendragon, it is still a very short amount of time, like 6 seconds. You are still not only making one attack, you're making a flurry of blows, and you're parrying and all that stuff. But if you succeed in your roll and you're higher than your opponent, you actually had made contact with them and you roll your damage, and then you compare it to a lot of different numbers. This is, this is, and I have to keep reminding my players, does it beat this number? Does it beat that number? Does it beat this other number? And the reason why you do that is because one of them is you get to reduce the damage by your armor value. So if you've got 10 armor points and I do 11 with my attack, you take 1 point of damage out of about 30, right? Because most people are running around with about 30 hit points. So you take a point of damage, boom. But if your knockdown is only 10, and I remember I rolled an 11 before your armor, it was higher than your knockdown, you get knocked to the ground. If I rolled really high, like a critical or what have you, and maybe I did 11 points of damage over your armor value. Maybe you didn't succeed on your skill roll, so you didn't get to put your shield in the way. You did, like I said, you didn't get to defend yourself. You only rely on your armor. And let's say I did 11 points of damage to you, but your major wound value is only a 7, or let's say whatever. Well, I beat your major wound, so you just took an injury like a broken bone or a caved in skull, or, I cut you so deep that you immediately pass out. So you've got this major wound value, you've got a knockdown value, you also have what's called an unconscious value, which is higher or lower on certain characters. And when your hit points drop below that number, you pass out just from the accumulated injuries. And then you also need to track on your character sheet. You can do this. You track each time you take an injury, because each one of those can be healed separately. And you don't really heal very much. You heal maybe 3 points a week. So if you are injured really badly, let's say you're down to like 5 hit points out of 30, remember that. So you're down 25 points. It's going to take you a week and a day, or take you a long time to get your hit points back up. Not a week. A week is only 3 points. It's going to take you I'm losing my mind. Normally it takes you about 10 weeks to get 30 hit points back. So think of that. 10 weeks. That's like 2.5 months, right? Yeah, injuries don't come back very fast. There's no like, I just drink a healing potion and I'm good to go. That doesn't exist. There is first aid where you can be each wound can be healed, possibly by 3 points. So if you had 5 wounds, you could technically have each one first aided, and you might get 3 points on each one of those. So that'd be 15 points back. And then you still are down by 15. So it's going to take you another 5 weeks to heal, right? So healing is slow. Healing might be slow, but remember, in most cases, you go on one adventure and then you have the rest of the year of downtime. So you have the rest of the year to heal up and recover. Usually, doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes there's back-to-back adventures, but usually there's enough time between adventures that you have a little bit of time to recover. Now, in this game, there is everyone is assumed, not really assumed. Everyone is required to be a knight. So you are either a Christian or a pagan. knight. Now, in Pendragon, the world, just to give you a little heads up on the world, it's post-Roman England. So the Romans were here, and they built Hadrian's Wall, and they did all the Roman roads and the Roman castles or forts and all that stuff. And then they just gave up on England, and they left, and they kind of abandoned England, and we'll get into that in a minute. But basically, it's post-Roman, much post. You could call it the Dark Ages. It's around 500 A.D. And it's around that period where knights are just now starting to develop into a romantic style knight. In the past, a knight was nothing but just a soldier on a horse, right? It was a soldier that carried a lance, had armor, and demanded respect because of it. You had foot soldiers, you had archers, and you had knights. A knight was someone on a horse, usually. And then gradually, over time, that started to become, it kind of morphed into, later on, the knight in shining armor, that kind of stuff. So because of that, horses are a big deal in Pendragon, right? You have horse maintenance, you have horse death, you have horse personalities, you have horse colors and mannerisms, and basically they really put a lot of it's almost like your second character. They put a lot of emphasis on your horse. But it's really not necessary, because a horse is a horse, of course, right? Okay. Wealth. Okay. There is money. There's what's called a librum, gold, and then a denarii, which is silver. And a denarii is like, or a librum is like 240 denarii. Knights, they don't really manage their finances. Their squires do that for them, or their wife, or they might have a page under them, or depending on if their social status. But they earn this money, but they just immediately go like, I don't know what this is. Here, you take it. But they do know what that is, and it's a little misunderstanding that at some point you were a squire and you had to deal with the finances of your knight. So you are familiar with money. You know what costs what, how much it costs, and stuff like that. But now that you're a knight, you don't deal with that. It's like you don't just memory hole it. You don't forget about it. But now you just don't have to deal with it. So you hand it off. But there are certain knights that have to deal with finances and maintaining their fief or their land and all that stuff. So there is that. So it's a little misunderstanding that knights don't know what money is. They do know what it is. They just don't deal with it, because their job is to fight for their lord, to be there to bring justice or protect the citizenry and stuff like that. And they practice and train in combat constantly. That's their job, not dealing with cleaning their armor or maintaining the horse. That's their squire. Okay. But if this is also another thing, just because you're a nobleman doesn't mean you get everything handed to you for free. Just because you're a noble and you walk into a city, you can't just walk into an inn and say, I demand a drink, and then they give it to you and then you don't pay for it. No, it's not like that. Everything has a cost. You're a knight, you still have to pay for it, but they will respect you and honor you because you are a noble. But but just because you're a noble, and that's another thing. If you're a knight in a foreign land, or another kingdom or what have you, they're not going to just obey you because you're a knight. I mean, they will, unless it violates some other uh, orders that they might have received from their own knight, right? So they have loyalty to their own kingdom or whatever. You can't just walk in as a noble and say, I demand this and that. So people have to understand that. Even in your own town, you don't just walk in and say, I demand you give me a drink for free. Now, can you demand that? Yes. Will they provide it? Probably yes. But then you will have resentment. Okay. Um, okay, and then there's the winter phase, which um, that's when your squire develops, your horse dies, you possibly your uh, you progress your character. This is where you roll to see if you have a child with a lady. This the end. The winter phase is not happening during the winter. It's it's just when all the dice are rolled. It happens throughout the year, um, but you just roll the dice during the winter phase. Okay, and that's when everything levels up. This is when you get paid. This is when you decide if you're going to spend money on your outfit, or all that is taken care of during the winter phase. And then this is kind of cool right here. There's a coat of arms generator, which allows you to roll randomly on a variety of different tables to determine what color your shield is, what animals might be displayed on there, what kind of bars or separators, and all different manner. You've seen heraldry in the past. You know what a shield design might look like. You might have even made a few shields during your role-playing experience. But there is a game mechanic here that lets you roll dice to determine your character's heraldry. Is it complicated? Yes. It's relatively there is a whole college of heraldry in England that trains people on how to read heraldry, and they have the tomes upon books. I'm sure it's all digital nowadays, but they've got huge amounts of data on all the heraldry throughout the years and stuff like that, and what certain things mean and stuff like that. Now, all of that is not in the game. What is in the game is how to roll dice and determines what your heraldry is. But even then, going from table to table and back and forth and reading left and right, there's an infinite number of possibilities on these charts. And it does get that they're using heraldic terms, like bendy and purple and argent, and I could go on. But there's all these heraldic terms are being used in the coat of arms generator that a normie might not know what any of this means, and it would be very complicated to figure it out. I do plan to spend an hour or more, possibly an hour, video recording how to use the coat of arms generator. I say that because I watched a live stream of a group of people working through the coat of arms generator, and it took them hours upon hours to do something that should have only taken about 10 minutes. Because they didn't understand. They were like, what does this mean? How does this affect my, And so I was like, that gave me a clue. I better make a video. Because I did a lot of heraldry. Again, back when, like I said, I fought with sword and shield for a long time. I know all about heraldry. Not all, not 100%, but I know a lot about heraldry. Let's just say that. Okay, so let's keep on going. I know, again, I'm going to say this one more time. This video is probably really long, and I hope you appreciate this this commentary. If not, hey, whatever. Sorry. Okay, it says welcome to Camelot right here. Depending on the time that you're playing your campaign, Camelot might not even exist. You might be in a time period that is before Camelot. You might be playing after King Arthur's death or whatever, in Avalon or whatever. Just understand that the designer, Greg, said and has made it abundantly clear, very, very purposefully. He put in a whole chapter or a whole sidebar saying, make Pendragon your own game. Don't try to make it like my game. Don't try to make it like your friend's game. Make it your game. Change things. If you don't like this, toss it out. If you want to add something, add it. First of all, you shouldn't have to be told that. That should just be common sense. But there are a lot of game masters out there that don't realize they have the agency to do their own thing. Well, guess what? You do. And he even says it in there. Do it. Make Pendragon your own. And that's what I'm doing with, I didn't say this earlier, but I'm making some changes to my Pendragon game where I want it to be more, not fantastical. I don't know if that's the word. I want there to be more fantasy elements in the game. Like I want there to be monsters. I want there to be more magic. There is a smattering of that kind of stuff in the Pendragon lore. There are monsters, there's giants, and there's dragons or whatever. But I'm gonna put more in there. Do I want orcs? Maybe not. Maybe a goblin. I don't know. I'm trying to decide what I want to do with that. But I want there to be villages that get ransacked by bandits, and when the players get there, they find out that they're not bandits, they're actually orcs or something, right? And where do these orcs come from? They don't just, the island is completely covered by humans, right? There's no elves and dwarves and halflings and stuff like that. But in the mythos of Pendragon, there are dwarves and there are elves. Like in one of the stories, an elf shows up and talks to the players. Well, where did he come from? He didn't just magically, he's not like a lone elf. I'm sure there's other elves. But there's also fairies in the woods and stuff like that. And a lot of the mystical, magical stuff happens in the woods. And so I'm going to work it into my campaign. Okay, so if you do decide to join my campaign, just understand it's not um, it's not going to be cookie cutter Pendragon. Here it is. You can play the game as episodic scenarios or high fantasy. Um, my initial portion of the game, which I'm still in my campaign, is the episodic portion of it. Like I said, you do an adventure and you go to the winter phase. But after the Gray Knight, after we do all of the introductory pre-written stuff, then we're going to start going into more of a high fantasy, traditional fantasy RPGs type of game. Okay, it talks about time passes. That's I think I've already gone over that. Now this is something very important. No, not super important, but it's important to grasp. The Pendragon chronology looks like 415 is when they would like to. Most of their data is coming from 415 to 566. And you have different things happening during these periods. If you remember, King Uther was the Uther period. Before Uther was the Aurelius period. And I think they're saying about 415 is when the Romans left, right? And so looking like 70 years later, 65 years later, well, actually, if you look at 38, not too much longer is when Uther takes over. But Uther dies, and then there's a time between 496 to 509 where there is no king of England. And this is when my campaign started, during the Anarchy period. We are currently in 510 in the campaign. And in 510, that's when Arthur pulls the sword from the stone. And so this is where we are at. We are at King Arthur becoming, well, the Squire Arthur becoming the boy king. And then he reigns for 18 years. Well, I'm sorry, 8 years. He reigns for 8 years before the conquest period. And then there's the romance period. And then there's the tournament period, the Grail quest period, which everyone's probably familiar with, Holy Grail. And then the Twilight period. Everyone is expected to be a knight. You are expected to have been a page, then you were a squire, and now you are a knight. And it goes because being a knight is the core theme of this campaign or of the game, that they spend a lot of pages explaining what it means to be a knight, how to become a knight, the ceremony that you go through to be a knight, disadvantages for being a knight, and then the different types of knights. Like there's vassal knights and banner knights. What knights are supposed to do. And there's a lot of cool art in the book. Just interesting. Like these guys, wooden swords or maybe rebated swords, small shields. Just practicing. Or it's not a tournament. Tournaments didn't really happen like this one-on-one until much later in the period. I think I need to touch on this. Okay, being a knight in Pendragon is, I don't know if I'm using this term properly, but it's like gender agnostic. There's kind of a I'm gonna say that it is a modernization of the stories. And I'm not going to say this is a good thing. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. I'm just going to say it is a thing. Players obviously can be a man or a woman. There's no problem. But even a female player that jumps into the game, that plays a female character, will play a knight. And so there are in this game, in this modern version of Pendragon, the 6th edition, you just make a knight. A knight is either a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. And in the world, there is a in the rules there is an area where it talks about how you as a game master are going to treat this. Are there an equal number of female knights to male knights? Is there very few? Are you rare? Is it unheard of? What is the deal, right? And it's up to you to decide. I mean, hell, like I said, it's your game. But the game wants it to be, the game company wants it to be welcoming to all types of game players. So if you want to play a female knight, go right ahead and play a female knight. You're not going to be treated any differently. Well, you might be treated slightly differently because you are a woman, but you're still going to be treated like a knight. You're going to be respected like other knights. You're not now in history, is that the case? No. No. I mean, in real history, that would be unheard of, right? There might be the occasional Joan of Arc or whatever, but that was kind of weird, right? That wasn't the norm. That wasn't really accepted, or that kind of stuff. Actually, Joan of Arc had to disguise herself as a man for a long time until they found out when they burned her at the stake. But in today's society, it would be kind of chauvinistic or kind of mean to not let girls play the game. That just doesn't make sense, right? That's just being a dick. So the rules have decided that you can play either a man or a woman. It's totally fine. And then and you will be accepted as a knight. Now, there are and since I'm on this modernization of the world, there's also Christians and pagans. In history, Christianity was a good portion, 90%, I don't know, of England, right? I mean, it was on the rise. Now, earlier, when the Romans had just came in, pagans were the norm in England, right? Because they didn't know any better. And then the Romans brought this Christianity to England and built all these Roman basilicas and churches and stuff like that to promote Christianity, and converted pretty much the entire island to Christianity. But and that's why they call like pagan religions the old religions or the old gods. But in modern 2025 time, 6th edition Pendragon, they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. They don't want to preach. They don't want to be. They don't want this topic to be divisive. They don't want players to argue about it. So they say that pagans and Christians are living together um, in harmony, right? Well, as a Christian myself and as a history buff, I find this to be a little abrasive. Just that alone. If they put pagans in their own box and Christians in their own box, I would have been totally okay with that because that's how it was. But because they now intermixed pagans and Christians in the same household, I mean, they've got, like in my campaign, we've got Sir Robert. He has pagans and Christians working for him. He's a Christian and he has a pagan working for him. And he's got a female knight working for him. I'm okay with that role playing campaign wise. I'm okay, but it bugs me to think about it realistically. That wouldn't happen, but as part of the game, I'm okay with that. Um, it just I just have to get over it. Is what I'm trying to say. I just have to, you know, I just have to bite my tongue and say, "Yep, okay." And I also need to understand this is a world, this entire Arthurian world is not Earth. It's not England in 510. It is Arthurian England, Britain in 510. So it's there's fantasy. I don't have any problem with a dragon flying over, but I've got a problem with a pagan being in a household. That just doesn't make sense, right? So 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 I play other games. Let's say I play a Greek Odyssey, right? And there's a million different gods, and uh, I have no problem with that, right? But when it comes to Christianity, that's where I draw the line. No, I'm gonna have to say it's okay to be a pagan in a Christian household. Maybe they just think you're, you know, misguided, or they're always trying to convert you into Christianity or something like that. I'll play with it, but I don't want it to be. It's not supposed to be divisive. It's supposed to be an opportunity for some role playing. Um, Even in the game, it says you can choose which one you want to play, but if you want to roll, you roll on this table, and it's a d6. And if you roll a 1 through 5, you're a Christian. If you roll a 6, you're a pagan. So it's like 1 in 6 chance of being a pagan, which I would say that I'm using that as kind of a guideline to decide how many pagans are actually running around compared to the Christians. Are they at war? Are they at no? They're living together. They work together, but they just have different. It's like Catholics and Protestants. They might believe slightly different things, but in general they're friendly. And that's the way that works. Okay, so we're moving on. Okay, here's another point. I got to the player's map, and this kind of reminded me. Um, so you'll notice that England is very sparse when it comes to like villages and towns and cities and stuff like that. Um, and then you got the wall up here, and then you've got uh, Lothian and Gore and all these kingdoms up here. These are kingdoms, by the way. Um, they um, the entire island, okay, the entire island is uh, populated, obviously. Um, Most of these are what you would call Cymric people, which Cimmerics are kind of like a Roman, Trojan, English mix, right? Mostly Trojan and England, believe it or not, descendants. But they've been the Trojans were here a long time ago, and the descendants, it's like over 1,500 years later or something like that. But the main seat of power is Longris, right? But uh, there's all these different kingdoms, and without a true king of England or one king, these are a bunch of different smaller kingdoms all fighting against each other, or warring against each other. But they don't fight against each other. Now, if you see like Wessex, Sussex, and Essex, I'm sorry, I wanted to say East, but you got Essex, and then there's something else up here I don't remember. But those are all Saxon kingdoms, and that's where the conflict in Pendragon comes from. You've got the Britons or the Cymric people, and then you've got the Saxon people, and you can think of Saxons kind of like Vikings, or a little bit, they're more not barbaric, but not civilized. They just have a different way to do things. They still have knights, they still have kings, they still have honor and their duty and all that. They're exactly the same, but everybody's at war. All right, so that was the Pendragon game. I kind of just took a moment to scroll through the entire book, and it looks like I had touched on all of the subjects that I wanted to touch on. Yeah, so if you're interested in joining my campaign, let me know. Drop a message in either Roll20. You should be able to find me under, well, you can look up Pendragon, and it's being run by Derek, Darick, as you can see right there, my name. That is my name in Roll20, and you have to have Roll20 to be able to play. It's a web app, so you don't have to download anything. Plus, we play on Discord. That's where our voices are. There is no need for a camera. That's totally optional. Don't even worry about a camera, but voices. Got to be able to hear you talk. And Roll20 is really where I show you all the pictures and the maps and move the tokens, and where we roll all their dice and we keep our character sheets. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming out and checking this out. I know it was a little longer than I wanted it to be, but I will catch you in the next one.